creep in before the pain creeps in or mood goes down. So knowing in a very basic way. And that sounds quite simple, but it's a lot of trial and error. So you might say, well, I can read for an hour before the lines start running in together or whatever, I start getting tired or I lose my concentration. So we try and make it as easy as possible. So what I actually can do 45 minutes easily before anything changes. And I'm just using reading as an example. So how much of anything can I do before I'm on the edge of that overtiredness and pain? Knowing your daily routine. Medication can change that sometimes, especially if we need pain medication. Suddenly we're sleeping longer or it's harder to sleep, and that can really disrupt a routine. But it's hard to stick to medication also if you don't know how many hours in the day you're awake, as is often the case. Setting those goals and sticking to them. And I have an example to follow. And then make reminders personal to you. If I'm in the middle of something and somebody comes to me and says, Deirdre, you have to stop this now, you're killing yourself, they're not going to get a very warm reception, I'll be honest. But the phone, there's no person attached to the phone. That's what works for me. Make it personal to you. Especially if it's someone who's quite close to you that is going to be the one reminding you to stop something, or maybe you've walked enough. I think there has to be that conversation around how that happens. Because it's easy to go, listen, I'm having a good day. I'm going to get this done. Okay, why is that important though? Like with the boom to bust, this is sort of the cycle that can happen. So I'll use pain, but this is just as applicable to fatigue as I said. So there's pain or fatigue, so we start avoiding activities. So then we're less active overall, which leads to deconditioning. And when I say deconditioning, that's the entire body. So our strength, our stamina, our overall health deconditions. Just if you don't use it, you lose it, as they say. So then there's pain or fatigue on mild effort. Then the fear creeps in. Well, if I try to do more, I'll only get more tired. Or if I try to exercise a little bit more, I might injure myself. Or I might get a flare. Which then means we do even less. And then there's pain or the fatigue, it takes less to kick it off. So I think we're all familiar with that, but how do you turn it back around again? That's the tricky bit. And with all of this, I have to say, we need to know our medical limits too. In that before we're looking at exercise or diet, you need to know what actually will do harm. That's so important. There's no point setting all these lovely goals for yourself and your physician says, listen, that isn't realistic, or actually could do some harm. So obviously with any of this, getting medical supervision, at least as the kick-off point, so that you can understand truly if the fear is realistic or not. Because I'm not here to convince anybody that you should all be doing more exercise if that's not realistic to you. And it's only an example. So if we're at the point of the fatigue starts with less effort, or the pain, how we can move out of that is stretching. Now, for most people, a lot of able-bodied people, they stretch in preparation for their exercise. But for a lot of us, the stretching itself is the exercise. That's enough. Yeah. And sometimes we're faced with physios who are saying things like, okay, well you do 10, 15 minutes of stretching, and then you do your exercises, and then you do a cool down afterwards, and you're looking at them going, are you for real? Seriously? So, realistic. The start stretching, it can also work for our brains as well. As in maintaining focus, keeping active, keeping our brains healthy too. Strengthening activities are the next step. So then we're starting to feel stronger and more in control. And the control is a big piece, because it can feel like our bodies are out of control. They're just the vehicle. They're sort of the banger of the car that kind of carries us along through life sometimes. And we're not mechanics, we don't necessarily know how to fix it. So there's reduced fear, and then as we build our strength and our endurance increases, the fear reduces, we can do things for longer, so we become more confident. And then, I don't like the way that's phrased, but return to productive activities. I think it's actually better as in you get close to that goal that you were aiming for. I think it's probably a better way to phrase that. So this is an example of a graded program. What you'll also see though is that there's a setback plan. And I think we're all great at saying all the things we're going to do, but when there's the days where it's just not going to work, or those unexpected days, or life happens, or whatever happens, we need a plan for those days too, because they're going to happen. So if we take, I left the example as I use for other groups. It's about catering it to yourself. So first of all, we're starting with the goal, which is to be able to walk, or maybe even drive. Because driving can be a big demand on energy, concentration, just the hassle of getting in and out, finding a park, all of that, that's a chore in itself. For half an hour, 5 times a week, to be able to do a bit of shopping and go home with 2 bags. So that's a very specific goal, isn't it? Rather than, I want to go shopping. It's broken down week by week. So you start with the shorter drive or walk, starting with the 10 minutes. You have a marker. Well, I know if I go to such and one's gate, or if I get to whatever shop, or whatever bus stop, depending where you're living, I know I've done my 10 minutes. And it's gradually increased. And you've all done this before. With the physio, with all the graded therapies, it's been a part of your lives before, more than likely. But it's about being strict with ourselves so that we can do it again. So, reading, driving, walking, whatever the goal may be. Gradually 10 minutes to 12, 14 to 17. The markers change. So now we're reading 2-3 chapters instead of 1, for example. And building on from there. You'll see at around 17 minutes, the setback plan had to kick in, because maybe it was a particularly bad pain day, or maybe the fatigue was particularly bad. Maybe the pacing the day before wasn't quite as good as we were aiming for, and we're more tired today. That's realistic, and that's going to happen. I think if we don't account for that, we're being a bit too silver lining, let's say. So we try and stay at that level on the bad days as well. If that's not possible, slow it down. Break it into batches. If necessary, take more rests. Take a step back if that doesn't work. So if you're at the 17 minutes, it's too much, a bad day has come along, you can't manage the 17, take a step back to the 14. Because what most of us do, guilty as charged, is go, oh, it's a bad day, I can't do anything. Or, it's a bad day, if I do anything now, I'll make it worse. Or, I'm back to the beginning. And I think, well, I can't do anything now. And it takes time to get out of that habit of thinking, of going, actually, I've worked up to 17 minutes, it's taken me a month to get here, I don't want to go back to 0. So I'm going to try 14. Try every other day, breaking it up. And aim, if you haven't managed to do that by taking the steps back, try and get back to it as soon as you can. Try and get back to the 10 minutes and get back to it as soon as you can. And that's where the resilience kind of comes in, isn't it? It's where you're able to convince yourself, okay, it's worth giving this another go. How does that sound? Bit too good to be true, maybe? Are there a lot of yes buts? If it's a bad pain day, I just can't do it. That can be the case, but you have a plan for it now. So with any graded program, this is kind of the aim. Those micro changes, as I say. So know your routine, have a stable routine. And this really helps with sleep as well, actually. Routine and sleep are really important. Starting to do those regular exercises. Anybody tried Tai Chi here at all? Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga. Chair yoga is pretty trendy at the minute. Very gentle ways of reintroducing exercise. There's always an alternative way. I love doing jigsaws personally for distraction, but I don't want a house full of jigsaws, so I do them online. Now, I never thought in my mid-30s I'd be an avid jigsaw maker, but it works for me. So it's the same with getting back to new things, and like exercise. With a lot of those exercises, they involve breath that you can do on the bad days if you can't do the exercise. And also, if you find a good teacher, they'll accommodate to you. With my yoga teacher, she kind of lets me freestyle in the corner. It's like, Deirdre, this one isn't for you, okay? Skip this one. When there's a good teacher, it's in their interest to make it accessible for you as well. And as I say, chair yoga is particularly common at the moment. Lots of different teachers doing it, and you don't even need to move that much. So no matter what your ability is or things are changing, you can still give it a go. So it's about being open to doing it a different way too. As I say, we're not all looking for marathon runners at the end of this. So stabilising your routine, starting the regular exercises, deciding on the goal and the specific thing you're going to do to meet that goal. It might be swimming. For me, everybody was saying that you have to keep exercising, get back to exercise, but I didn't have a handle on how confident I felt. One of the medications meant I gained a lot of weight. I didn't feel like putting my swimming tops on then. So then I had to look at, well, what else is going to get me to the pool? This isn't as simple as just hopping back into the pool. Sometimes there's work that has to happen before then. Increasing the duration of your exercise. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Set your exercise or activity baseline. So that baseline that we talked about for the pacing, knowing how much you can do before you do too much. How many shirts can I iron before I can feel the fatigue kicking in? Okay, can I do the same amount of shirts sitting down? Can I only load the top of the dishwasher and someone else is to load the bottom? You know what your lives look like, and it's different for all of us. So there isn't one cookie cutter that I can say, this is what's going to work for everyone. But breaking it down into the small things, knowing how much you can do before you're doing too much. So that's your baseline, that's where you're trying to build from. It takes time. And then increase how long you're doing it for, and then increasing the intensity. And with that, the confidence and everything else builds. Resting too much, which we can all be guilty of, can worsen our overall condition. If we're resting the one bit that hurts, we're resting the rest of the body that loses its strength, and it can set us back further. And the longer we rest, sometimes we need it, don't get me wrong, but the longer we rest, the less likely we are to want to kick back into that change program, that graded program that we started. So it's useful to have the plan for that. Trying to maintain as much of the changes you've tried to implement. If you can't do it, as I said, there's the step back, and trying to get back to it as soon as possible. Okay, so here's some of the alternatives that I mentioned. Pilates also. There's a vote of agreement over here, I think, is great cheers for Qigong and Tai Chi and everything. Okay, and then there's a little bit about ourselves and some of the links at the end. How am I doing on time, Fran? Need to wrap it up. Thought so. What I'd say in conclusion, first of all, thank you all for your attention. And I know today some of it will have sank in, other days it won't. Take your time with it. Try changes, but remember that compassion. We're not robots, you can't plug us in. We'll get it wrong some days, but it's worth trying.